A storm moves over the Blue Ridge Mountains. The trees darken, the earth sharpens, and somewhere in Shenandoah National Park, a ranger steps out into weather that most people would instinctively avoid. For Roy C. Sullivan, that moment did not happen once. It happened again and again and again, until one man's life became one of the strangest survival stories ever recorded. Roy Cleveland Sullivan was born in 1912 in Virginia and worked for decades as a park ranger in Shenandoah National Park. By the time his story became famous, he was already known as a rugged, capable outdoorsman, the sort of man whose job placed him close to storms, ridge lines, lookout towers, and exposed ground far more often than most people ever experience. That context matters because it helps explain why lightning was in his life at all, though it does very little to explain why it seemed to return to him so often. According to the record later recognised by Guinness World Records, Roy Sullivan survived 7 lightning strikes between 1942 and 1977, more than any other known person. Guinness still records him as the man who survived the most lightning strikes. Over the years, he earned nicknames like the Human Lightning Conductor and the Human Lightning Rod. His first documented strike came in April 1942. Sullivan was in a fire lookout tower when a storm moved in. The tower had no lightning rod at that time, and he later described it being struck repeatedly, with fire jumping around inside. He ran from the tower and was struck just a few feet away. The lightning burned a strip down his right leg, damaged his toe, and blew a hole through his shoe. It was not a minor shock. It was the kind of event that would define most people's lives. For Roy Sullivan, it was only the beginning. Years passed before the next officially counted strike. In July 1969, lightning reached him while he was driving his truck on a mountain road. Cars usually act as a kind of protective shell in storms, but in Sullivan's case, the bolt was said to have entered through the open window after striking nearby trees. It knocked him unconscious, burned off his eyebrows and eyelashes, and set his hair on fire. That detail, his hair igniting, would recur in later strikes, often enough that he started carrying a can of water in the truck specifically to put himself out. The third strike came on August 7, 1970, while he was in his front yard. The fourth came on April 16, 1972, at a ranger station, where lightning set his hair on fire again. The fifth came on August 7, 1973, while he was out on patrol and believed a storm cloud was actually following him. He later said he saw the bolt that hit him. It moved down his left arm and leg, knocked off a shoe, crossed to his right leg, and once again set his hair on fire. He reached the truck and poured the water over his head. The sixth documented strike happened on June 5, 1976. Sullivan reportedly saw a cloud, tried to get away from it, and was struck anyway, injuring his ankle and, once again, setting his hair alight. Then came the seventh on July 25, 1977, while he was fishing. Lightning hit the top of his head, burned his chest and stomach, and ignited his hair yet again. In one of the strangest details attached to that final strike, Sullivan said that while he was still recovering at the water's edge, a bear approached and tried to steal trout from his fishing line, and he struck it away with a branch. Whether he told with disbelief or dark humour, that final scene only deepened the legend around him. What made Roy Sullivan's story so compelling was not only the number of strikes, but the way it changed his life. Later accounts describe him as growing increasingly wary of storms and increasingly convinced that lightning was, in some way, drawn to him. People around him sometimes kept their distance in bad weather, half joking, half serious. Even he seemed to feel that if a storm was near, he might somehow be its target again. That kind of fear is easy to understand. After one strike, a person becomes cautious. After 7, the sky itself must begin to feel personal. And that is where the mystery of Roy Sullivan's life really lives. Because science can tell us a great deal about lightning. It can explain elevation, exposure, conductive paths, probability and risk. It can explain why a ranger working outdoors in mountainous terrain would face danger others rarely encounter. But when one man is struck 7 times and lives through each one, explanation begins to coexist with something else. That uneasy feeling people have when statistics stop feeling abstract and start feeling almost intimate. Roy Sullivan died in 1983 at the age of 71. His death was not caused by lightning, but by a self-inflicted gunshot wound. That ending gives the story a different weight, because behind the nicknames and the Guinness record was not a myth, but a human being, someone who survived what should have killed him again and again, and still carried the ordinary burdens of a life no storm could simplify. 7 strikes, 1 man, a lifetime spent under skies that must have begun to feel less like weather and more like fate. And maybe that is why Roy Sullivan's story still lingers. Not because lightning can't be explained, but because sometimes, when the same force returns to the same life over and over again, explanation no longer feels like the whole story.